Thank you, everyone. If we can settle into our second session. We do have the roving. Okay. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is session 2 of our Falf Day Innovation Ecosystem Panel discussion, or what we may want to talk about now is our Innovation Community Panel discussion. Beyond the paper, building, protecting, and funding your innovation. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our facilitator for the session, Ms. Nazleen Patel, who is the Senior Innovation Manager of the WITS Innovation Center. So we're very lucky to be well supported by the WIT today. Nazleen is a strategic leader with a career rooted in the South African National System of Innovation, specializing in technology transfer, intellectual property, and commercialization. She has demonstrated a proven track record, including facilitating the successful commercialization of several companies and secured millions in external funding. Nazleen's expertise covers the full innovation life cycle, from ideation, new product development, feasibility assessments, route to market, launch and upscaling, applied across sectors such as health, biotechnology, natural resources, and financial services. Basically, Nazleen is the person you want to talk to, and the person that Tom was referring to in his speech to us earlier this morning. So Nazleen, thank you so much, and welcome to our Falf Day. I hand the session over to you. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Innovation Ecosystem panel. It's great to have you here. Our theme specifically says beyond the paper, right? Building, protecting, and funding your innovation. Linked to Falf's theme for the year, from research to revenue. But we know that revenue is not necessarily the end goal. Commercialization and impact is, right? Commercialization, however, is not about commercializing for the sake of it, right? It's about enabling great ideas to reach the people who will benefit from them. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge today's program that honors Prof. Keo Mutong, whose career exemplified this very journey. I had the privilege of working with her closely at my time at the Innovation Hub, and I saw firsthand how she brought research ideas to life. I even used her product, and I can say that it was great for back pain. So if you are familiar with it, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, just search La Africa's Food and you'll find out. Okay. I think there is something particularly symbolic again about this year's Falf Day, being anchored by the launch of the second Falf Research Chair hosted at Nelson Mandela University. And because in many ways that represents Falf, what Falf is about, honoring the academic leaders who came before us and investing in the researchers and leaders who will shape what comes next. And that brings us, I think, nicely into today's conversation. What happens after the paper? So how do discoveries become inventions or innovations? And how do we protect them? How do we fund them? But most importantly, how do we ensure that they create lasting impact? And with that in mind, I'm going to ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves, but I feel like you already know Tom quite well at this point. So Tom, with regards to the building aspect of the panel, commercialization really begins with the patent, as I think you've also mentioned. It begins with recognizing that opportunity and identifying the real problem that's worth solving. because great science doesn't necessarily create market demand. So based on your experience at the university and within technology transfer, what's the moment you have most reliably seen research sort of tip into something that the market actually wants?
Is that working?
This one.
I'll use this one.
Okay.
Yeah, great. This is working. So Nazin, thank you. Delighted to be here on the panel with my fellow panelists. And I mean, it's a big question, isn't it? And it may come as a surprise to some of you in the audience, but the way these panels work is we get told about these questions in advance. So as you all know, I've had a chance to give this a bit of thought. But yeah, I'm very aware you've already had an hour of me banging on, so I don't want to say too much. But I think one way of looking at this is when other people are willing to put their money into your idea. Now, that's only one way of looking at it. But how do you know it has tipped? I think it's a great question. It's a great phrase, the idea of this thing sort of tips into commercialization. Assuming you've got a project where you need some finance, you don't always. You can have sort of organic growth. You can have bootstrapping and all of these things. But assuming you've got some early stage tech, you need to spend a lot of money before it comes useful. One of the times is when other people will invest their money in your idea. And that may be investors, that may be seed capital, venture capital, but it's exactly the same concept if it's a company or if it's a consulting customer, somebody who wants to engage you as a consultant. Why are they spending their money on your idea? Because you've got something of value. And so you can take this view that until there has been a sort of financially based transaction, it hasn't tipped. I mean, that's one thing. But I think, maybe thinking more broadly about it is one of the things we should also recognize is this point I made about team. You will not succeed on your own, full stop. Now, some of you may still think you will, and that's fantastic, but you're wrong, you won't. So one of the indicators as well is building that team. So if it is only you, boy, it's going to be hard. So start building that team, and that'll help you tip over into commercialization. Those tools I showed you, the KTH from Sweden, the innovation readiness levels, use those to get an honest assessment of where you are. And in my experience, when you ask people what sort of innovation readiness levels they're on, whether it's technology or customer or IP, it's what I call a sort of N-1 model. They think they're on 4, but really it's 3. So, whatever you think you're on, you're probably not that far. There's a bit of optimism is a good thing, but reality as well. So assess your position along these measures, whether it's the MedTech one, the Gates, or KTH. And just to reiterate again and again, you're never going to tip over until you talk to customers. So talk to customers. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks so much. All right, then moving to protecting. Sean, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick intro about yourself, and then we'll go into the question.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shan Pogo, and I am a senior associate at Kish IP in the Trademarks Enforcement Department. I don't even think I want to say what I have mastered in, because everybody here has a PhD, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to study some more. But yes, I do have masters in IP, and I primarily help clients with pharmaceutical, luxury goods, as well as retail goods, and basically enforcement strategies.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, so we know that protecting starts with timing. And I think Tom brought that quite clearly through in his presentation.
Yeah.
And he touched on a few of the elements that are quite important for researchers to understand, that you don't need to choose between patenting or publishing. Both can happen. But what, from your experience sitting at Kish IP, would you like every researcher to understand about protecting their work before it's too late to fix it?
Okay, so as I said, so I'm in the trademarks department, and we do have a patent side, which is the IP field that is more prominent today, right? But the issues we are seeing, they're just across the board. From a copyright, a trademark, or a patent side, you always deal with premature disclosure, or you find that people do not have proper record keeping of their research or their inventions or the artistic. There was a lady earlier who said she's from the arts department, right? People have difficulty proving that because in the preliminary stages of coming up with those, they do not do the due diligence. So if you are here, you're a researcher, maybe in the engineering department, and you think, oh my God, I just thought of something really smart. Together with that light bulb that you thought of something really smart, think about the bad guys out there who are going to come for it because everybody wants a piece of the pie. It's unfortunately the reality that we have today. So the minute you think you have something tangible, something that can be commercialized and might make you a millionaire, speak to your TTO. If you have attorney friends, speak to those, but always be careful not to give out too much information, because from a patent side, right? Okay, let me just quickly take you back to the basics. For a patent to be protected, the steps, as Tom mentioned, is that it must be novel, meaning it must not exist anywhere in the world. It must not form part of prior art. So it must not be out there. So if you are out there sharing what you have, you are disseminating the information. Can you see you're willfully, voluntarily putting it out there, that by the time you think, oh, let me obtain patent protection for this, the registrar is going to tell you, but this is on Facebook. You have destroyed it because you were rightly excited by for patent, try to withhold the cards closer to your chest and not share as much until you have spoken to the right people and they have filed what they need to file, or any type of agreement like the non-disclosures have been signed. Just always be excited, but be safe. Do not overshare.
Okay, I think just a quick follow on that. So patenting is not the only form of protection, as again Tom mentioned, and specifically with your experience on trademarks.
Yes.
Is it a good form of protection in your experience?
Absolutely, because okay, so in South Africa, I'll just limit the conversation to South Africa. In South Africa, your patent protection is for 20 years, right? And then after that, it falls into the public domain. You cannot renew it. So if, let's be practical, let's say you were a student here at VET, they filed a patent for you now. So it starts running from the date of filing. Your 10 years starts running from the date of filing. And maybe by the time you fully commercialize and you are working with Adcock or Aspen, all the fancy pharmaceutical people, it's 5 years from now. So you're already left with 15 years to really make money from that. And 15 years in a commercial space is a really, it's a short amount of time, right? It flies by so quickly. So if initially you thought of a broader IP protection, at the end of that 20 years, when the patent expires and there's nothing you can do, you now have trademarks, which you and your future children and their great grandchildren will still be able to protect as long as you keep renewing it every 10 years, right? So you want to make sure that you approach the right people who will give you a broader protection, because some of them do expire at one point, your designs, your patents, but trademarks, as long as you're on top of your renewal date, you will have it indefinitely. And yeah.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, so we'll move on to the funding element of things now. Tsimbani, please introduce yourself and then we'll go into the question.
Good morning, everybody. I am Tsimbani Kupani. I'm a senior program manager. I'm looking after the TIA Seed Fund. And we mostly, I think we are very popular in the university space. We provide very early risk-adjusted funding to actually assist researchers and students in translating their research ideas towards market. And generally that's the role of TIA in an instance, but that's the work we do. Currently in our portfolio, we're sitting with over 150 projects. And of that, I think about 75% of that is university-based projects. So I'm happy to be here and to share.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. So based on what you've just said, TIA plays obviously a very unique role in the ecosystem. And dealing with university technologies, very early stage, that can pose a problem for maybe private investors, right? So how does TIA and your programs kind of support that early stage risky ventures where you need to get it from promise to maybe delivery at least? How does TIA and do that?
So I like to talk based on the innovation funding value chain and the work that we do, and more especially the role that we play as TIA. So if you look into the innovation funding value chain from basic research up until commercialization, in South Africa we like talking about the value of death a lot. But a situation where universities are coming up or they are busy with their basic research work through the support of the NRF in most cases, busy with their basic research and applied research, which may sometimes lead to patenting, but you realize that that knowledge is not being translated into product and services that actually improves the quality of life. So that's where TIA comes in, and our role is to ensure that those research outputs, those ideas that researchers have done, that they actually understood to be different, understood to actually may add value to society, can then be translated into product and services. So our job is to make sure that we facilitate that process from proof of concept up until commercialization, and we do it more especially through funding. And the important part of our funding, I mean, not only funding though, but the important part of our funding is that if you look at the South African ecosystem, there isn't a lot of funders who are willing to play in this very, very early stage. And that's where TIA comes in, and that's where it actually becomes key. And when we provide that patient capital, which is actually necessary when the technology is not yet proven, when markets are not yet really proven, and you still need to do a lot of technology development, validation, and also ensuring that there is market and developing those business models to take your technology to market. And that's our role in ensuring that we support through financing, through more especially very patient financing, and ensure that we would actually help you with prototyping, validation, testing, piloting, regulatory approvals, including IP protection as well, and also assisting you with activities that may actually then necessitate to market. And our role mostly ends where you actually have your product that is actually ready for market deployment. So you've received your certification, you've received your regulatory approval, and you're ready to deploy that particular product into the market. So that's the work we do. But then we realized, because we've done this work for the past 15 years, we realized that most of the stuff we funded, or most of the technologies we funded, were actually stuck, where it's technologies that have been validated, but they're actually struggling to get to market. Venture capitalists at the time was still very risk averse. And that's when we actually then played a role and actually started forming partnership with late stage funders to actually just bridge that gap that we actually saw. And that's when we actually then formed partnerships with the likes of SASME Fund and co-invested into venture capitals to actually try to make sure that there is translation, or there is funders that are willing to come in a bit early and invest in technologies that have been proven to be viable, and actually ensuring that they are taken to market. I think the ecosystem has changed a bit. We've seen venture capitals or other funders coming in a bit early, and we've seen our role evolving a lot, but there is still a lot of challenges when it comes to university IP and converting it. There is still some sluggish in translating that IP, or it takes a little bit more time, because I mean, we work with SMMEs, we work with startups, we work with university research. And when you look at it, even in the seed fund where, which I'm responsible for, you would see that the startups or the SMMEs actually move quite quicker to market compared to university research. And it's due to a couple of other challenges, which obviously TIA on its own can't resolve, but it's an ecosystem type of an approach in terms of how do we come up with solutions to then bridge that gap in ensuring that university IP or university research is translated a bit quicker and actually get to market a bit quicker. But yeah, currently it's one of those challenges. But what makes TIA funding a bit different, or TIA support a bit different, is because the funding that we provide is patient, but it's also, we try to make sure that when we provide funding, it's linked to solving national challenges or socio-economic challenges that as a country we face. So we actually also try to link that and ensure that it's actually we invest in, or we support innovations that translate into impact into our society. Thanks.
Maybe just a quick follow on there. You mentioned that there's challenges, and you've seen actually that there's a speed that comes with SMMEs and startups that maybe university researchers or projects don't really have. Do you maybe want to unpack just one or two of the challenges, high level? Yeah.
So, okay, high level, one of the challenges we picked is that as much as we may support university research, most of them are not necessarily really market focused. Some of them lack technology road mapping from the beginning. So you'd realize that it's not mapped, and there isn't an end goal from the beginning to actually map out to say, what is it that I would need from phase one up until the end? So that's actually lacking. We actually really need to do a lot. I think as the ecosystem supporters, we need to do a lot in making sure that researchers understand how to map technologies from start to finish in terms of what are the requirements, what would I need to get this technology to the finish line. Second is, we've been actually, TIA has also been trying to do this, fostering this industry, academia industry collaboration. We've spoken, Tom's spoken about it, to say it's about the customer. Have those conversations with customers. As a researcher, I think sometimes because you're focusing on solving the problem, you also forget that somebody is actually must be willing to pay for it. It's solving a particular pain point for somebody. So there has to be a customer. You need to actually understand what their requirements are and what their needs are. And that has to do with industry and actually bringing industry closer to academia so that they can actually define what their problems are and actually try to match this gap that has actually been existing for a while and bringing them closer. And South African industry is not necessarily very, open. So I think there's a lot of heavy lifting that we actually have to do in opening it up, opening these linkages between academia and industry. But also it has to do with talent and ensuring that, sometimes converting a researcher into an entrepreneur, I don't think we should actually try to do that. But I think we should actually try to find initiatives to assist, to say, if you're a researcher, you don't necessarily have to become an entrepreneur, but you do need the basics to understand how to actually come up with a solution, because an entrepreneur comes up with a solution. So you need the basics, but also understanding that you don't essentially have to be a CEO of a spin-off. There are other channels that we can actually use to actually help you. I think tech transfer officers are there to actually assist you, to say, we can actually pair you up with somebody who's business minded, who can help you with the business side of things. You focus on the technology, you focus on the research. So building this, and I like this new word of venture building. I think it's actually going to be becoming very key in the university space in assisting researchers and matching them with entrepreneurs and business people to actually then bridge the gap between science and commercial aspects of things.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, Tato, give us maybe a brief introduction about yourself, and then we'll go into the question.
Yeah, afternoon, everyone. My name is Tato Tabane. I'm a senior associate at the University Technology Fund. So it's hard going after three amazing people in three different
Yeah,
spaces as well. But we basically, to put it simple, we invest in technologies that emerge from South African universities. So we sit in a particularly interesting handoff position or handover position, and that is between excellent research and investable opportunity. So that doesn't look the same all the time, and especially when you're focused on investing in deep technology, which is research-based technology, it may look or easy to say, listen, this is a great, scientific novel innovation, but then it may not be as clear who's the person that's going to first, adopt this. And I think that is where we find ourselves on a day-to-day, trying to navigate with the different parties, from the TTOs to the entrepreneurs, but to also the scientists. And yeah, that is what we do on a
Okay.
daily. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much. So, based on your experience also within the University Technology Fund, you guys fund businesses, right? It's not necessarily the protected IP that is the standalone look that you look at. You invest in businesses, teams, and the opportunity. So, maybe if you can tell us what would be the things that you guys look at to say that yes, this is something investable.
Sure. I think, I'm a chartered accountant by profession. So I like it's weird. I like calling it reverse engineering problems. So I'm not an engineer, but I think a lot of the times we miss what the end goal is because we get so excited about what we're doing. And as a person coming from corporate, I've learned to sort of evolve my thinking to dealing with a researcher or a scientist that really sees this as their baby, and having practical steps to say to guide as to what is the route to market. So I liked Tom's slides, a whole lot of them, but I'll pick one where there was a whole list before it got to venture capital. I think there were friends and fools, there was pre-grant, and on that pre-grant, there's a point that I wanted to sort of bring up that I think, in my experience in this space, there's a gap where Tembani calls the valley of death, and I think there's a challenge for corporate or industry to meet with universities, and I think it's much more bigger than just another asset class. I guess it's something that could be life changing to the country as a whole. So I guess yeah, the valley of death is where most technologies come, and they never really reach venture capital. So I like the topic as well. When it's called Beyond the Paper, because when you deal with universities, I think a whole lot of it, there's a lot of focus on around the scientific novelty. But what makes an opportunity investable really is having, and we always say, a real, sufficiently painful problem. And beyond that understanding, there's this route to market, and I can build out on it. But having a real, sufficiently painful problem, you have a source of truth that you can move from. And I think from there you start asking. When you talk about Sean with the novelty, start asking about that differentiated solution that we're bringing to the market now through this brilliant research, right? And that's when we start moving away from the scientific way of thinking and start applying a commercial mind and saying, then what credibility can we build? From a technical credibility, from a commercial, and we do this and we call this evidence. A lot of people come to venture capital and say, "No, I read on venture capital. You guys do early stage funding." It's not the same as. So early stage doesn't necessarily mean no evidence. So evidence can vary at certain stages, but when you think about venture capital, you must understand the commercial responsibility it comes with, right? So to make this brilliant innovation investable, you need to be you need to clearly understand the problem that is painful to be solved. You need to understand, the technical as well as the commercial evidence that is needed to sort of, convince the next person that takes over from it. And you also kind of you need to think about the team, and also obviously you need to think about that route to market. You need to have what we call a believable route that ensures that this innovation reaches the commercial customer at the end of the day.
Okay. And then maybe just to expand on what do you look for in a team specifically?
Sure. That's not a one size fits all, fortunately. And I've had many instances where, professors have stayed on, some choose to not even start the whole journey. I find it a bit, you know, sorry, I find it a bit surprising sometimes. I'm like, you know, it's such a brilliant invention, you know. It's like, no, I'd rather stay in academia. It's like, don't you want to make money? It's like, there's bigger things than making money. And you need to understand and respect that. But I think, you know, I had a chat with Tom before today, and, you know, comparing different universities, different worlds, you realize that a whole lot of it is all about culture. So I have the opportunity of working across the country with different universities, and I believe that at some point you start seeing the effect of a certain positive culture towards entrepreneurship within the university construct, and that is built a whole lot most of the time by experience. So if I see that Professor, you know, just bought a Ferrari from his innovation, maybe this lecturing thing I can do part-time because I'd love to have a Ferrari. And what that does is that the more the researchers talk about it, the more the lecturers talk about it, these are the experienced people in the universities that are trusted. You know, they start shifting, even when they talk about research, they start shifting about how this can have an impact in the world and not just a publication. And that's why I love this whole topic about beyond the paper, because essentially, I think that changes the unit we choose to measure. And to measure progress. And I say that because of the publication asks about the knowledge, you know, and the rigorous, you know, back and forth to make sure that it makes sense. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to simplify it. But then commercialization rather asks whether this solution actually works for a real user. So now, if you have a researcher already thinking in that pathway, it changes a whole lot. And I think you say entrepreneurs, you know, a team. I think anybody can learn to be an entrepreneur. Yes, there's talented people, you know. Like, to make the example, Messi maybe didn't learn how to play football, but Ronaldo definitely did, right? So he just knew how to, I think, you know.
It's a touchy subject for some of us.
And I think that when it comes to researchers, you know, it's not something that is so far for someone to start engaging in. And, you know, sometimes you don't even know the skills you have. So yeah, just to end it off, not to talk over everyone, I think, you know, the changing the unit of measure to measure progress instills a certain culture within the university construct, moving from just asking about publications that we're bringing forth, but also asking, you know, from a commercial point of view, where the solution will be used by a real user. And I think part of that, the answer is not what we are dreaming of, it's understanding whether they will adopt it, but also, you know, from a venture capital perspective, whether this can be repeatable and this can be also sustainable economically. And yeah, I think that's a whole new conversation, but I think given the audience, I think shaping the culture and the thinking really forms part of the core team, because no team is really great. I mean, some teams don't even have as qualified people, some do, but it depends on the culture within the team. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay, so I think we've mentioned that you know, there's identification of the opportunity and then protection. But maybe Tom or Sean, when does that commercial sort of opportunity turn into an IP strategy?
Please repeat your question to me.
So when does that commercial thinking turn into an IP strategy? So when is that point where, you know, you've identified an innovation or something, right? When do you start thinking about the IP strategy? And I think, Tom, you sort of touched on it in your presentation as well, but maybe just expanding on it a bit further, so that we know, again, you know, coming back to the point of there's timing involved,
Yes.
you know, and what should we be looking at, and when should we be looking at, actually this makes sense, let's look at the IP strategy around this, and is it necessary? Is an IP strategy necessary?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Obviously, I'm biased, but absolutely. So, testing. Okay. So, IP, right? Especially for researchers that are in university, because I'm going to assume everyone is affiliated with VERDS, maybe your students or researchers here.
There's also other universities.
Yeah.
In other
as well,
universities.
yeah.
Okay, so your respective universities. So IP is at the preliminary stages, right? I'm going to make an example with a pill, right? And again, I'm not a patent attorney, I'm in trademarks, so I'm not very sciencey, but I'll just use layman terms. So if you have a pill that can cure headache in literally 5 seconds, no one has done it before, right? And it's the best invention ever. I mean, it beats grandpa, right? It's gonna be better than grandpa. And you have seen that there's nothing else in the market. It's an inventive step. There's pills already to cure headache, but then yours just does it in 5 seconds. So, right? So when you have such a great idea and you're a researcher here at VERS or at your respective universities, again, the first point is to go to your TTO because they are actually tasked with protecting that IP. You need to sit down with them and have a conversation before you embark on a very lengthy journey of maybe seeking to publish whatever you have come up together with, right? Your TTO is tasked with making sure that they file provisional patent applications if it's necessary. If you want to call your pill popping man, they will file a trademark for you. Obviously, and I'm going to assume TTOs do it through us, IP attorneys, right? Right. Okay. Sorry, I don't know the back end. I'm just at the fighting stage of the legal side of things. So the IP protection is, in my view, if you are a researcher, right? If you're an engineer, you're an artsy person, you need to start equipping yourself with IP knowledge. And that does not mean you need to come and speak to Sean because I'm expensive. And then, you know what I mean? You have Google, there's information readily available everywhere today. Take your time to read up before even going to your TTO. Because you're a researcher, you're a brilliant mind, right? Take the time to sit down, use ChatGPT for good reasons, right? Compute that information in your mind and have a clear a pipeline or a thinking process of what this will eventually be. So make sure that you know where your invention can take you. I cannot stress it enough because if you do not address IP requirements in the preliminary stages of things, you will be crying. You will be coming to us saying someone stole your creation, but you can't prove it. Yes, I only told it to a trusting friend, but and then we now feel sorry for you and we tell you it's 500,000 to go to the high court to fight them. You can't afford it. So I cannot stress enough how much people cry in the real world. And I can only say sorry, So let's make sure that we address the IP requirements and the IP strategies and portfolio in the beginning. And again, because IP attorneys are generally expensive, right? Relatively, right? There's tools you can use if you don't want to come to us. One, like from a trademark perspective, if you want to call that pill a popping man, literally type into Google popping man pills, see what pops up. If it pops up, that already tells you someone beat you to the idea. Stay away from that name. If the actual pill and with the description and maybe it even has your chemical components making the pill, you're late, right? So you do not always need to have professional people holding your hands for you to know what you need to do, but just the time to go on Facebook. And you said earlier that patent literature is available everywhere. That is true. Some of these platforms, even though they are registry portals, right? They're available for you to just do the preliminary stages of knowing if you need to even bother your TTO with this information. You can just do the fundamental homework yourself and be like, okay, so someone did this. Oh, they're in Cape Town, so I'm late. I need to think about something else. It really goes a long way. Did I answer? I'm not sure.
Yes, I believe so, right? Okay. Tom, do you want to add anything to that?
Just very simply, you said, when's the right time? And I completely agree with you. I mean, yesterday or today, from the beginning.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Over to the two money people. You have the money, Sean, but these two give the money away. Okay. So investing in solutions, right? That's what I think the main point that came out of both of your talks, actually. But does a strong patent, we know that it creates defensibility, right? And a strong patent essentially means that it's granted in maybe a few territories across the world. does it make or does it scale, like tip the scale in terms of the venture being investable? And both of your opinions would be appreciated.
Okay, maybe let me start. For us at TIA, IP is actually very important. We even have specialists who would specifically just look at your IP and how and how you have gone about protecting it. So that IP strategy, for us, it's key for us to make an informed decision in terms of whether to invest or not. So depending on how strong your IP is, so I mean, back in the day, yes, I would say yes. How strong your IP protection strategy is was necessarily like very, very, very key. But I think the world is changing a bit to now innovation and also involving to you can actually have your trade secret, but that's the IP and how you actually keep that. So I would say for us, it's still one of the big component in terms of how we make decisions or how it informs us to make a decision whether to invest or not, in terms of how you've planned, whether you've actually really identified your IP correctly. You have actually identified in terms of whether is it novel, is it new, are you infringing? Actually, the key here is, are you infringing in other people's ideas that they've actually protected or not? Because if we invest and you are infringing, we are, we are involved as well. So we make sure that we try to avoid that. That's why I would want a clear IP strategy. We would also like to understand, how you're going to go about protecting it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a patent all the time. But we want to see a very clear protection strategy in place in terms of, because I mean, that defensibility is important, that mood is important for investment. And also to say, I think that IP strategy is very important to inform, to say, because it also assists you to say where is the market for this technology or this innovation that I'm building? Where can I possibly protect it? And we know that it's actually informed by your commercialization strategy as well. So it's important. It is a key factor in decision making. But we're not saying that you have to patent, but just have a strategy in place and make sure that it's a strong one. So IP is still key for us in a short.
Thanks. Tato.
Sure. Yeah, so I got the chance to think about this before, but now with the answers that I didn't know the answers would be this way. But I mean, certainly, I think, a strong patent can strengthen the opportunity, really. But I really don't think it's something that can carry an entire investment case. I think that's where, and the strategy behind it is key, especially when it comes to geographic. Certain regions are really great for certain products, like your medtech, there's grants you get in certain countries as well. So patents really help you understand, the freedom to operate, to help you understand, you know, it's almost a right to exclude others, so that you can gain fully from it. And an investor, obviously, that will
It's
help
important.
me, yeah, will help me definitely feel protected, especially if you're protecting the commercially valuable part of the business. But I started that way because, to be quite honest, a patent as a venture capitalist, as much as it's important, it doesn't always tell me whether the customers need that product. I mean, it doesn't always tell me,
True.
whether that team can deliver the product. And I've seen it so many times. And I think it certainly doesn't tell me as a CA, which is what I lean to really, evolving in my role, but doesn't tell me how economically sustainable this product would be, even if we brought it to life and people want it and there's a team to execute on it. And I think a whole lot of it, there's manufacturing partnerships involved, and people don't really understand sometimes the cost of choosing a certain direction where you want to take that IP. And people, and I think Tom touched on it, and people are always thinking spin out. I think one day I came to Vets and I said, guys, is there a company? They're like, no. It's like, okay, then they went and made a company. It's like, well, what I meant was that, do we have a route to how this will end up reaching the market, And sometimes creating a whole company where we manufacture isn't the
It's
answer.
not the
So
answer,
I
yes.
think IP strategy should involve more than just thinking about protecting the idea, but thinking about the investment case as a whole. And I think having this holistic thinking is the bridging
Yes.
towards other parties that can get involved in the matter of collaborating and beating this value of death. I think just to touch on the value of death, I think maybe it's out of the question. When you, I'm just going to put my notes aside. When you're dealing with deep tech, I've always realized there's a translation that happens in between different parties. So sure, you have your researcher, you have your TTO that helps you understand the research that you have in a commercial sense. Then you have a TIA, which is quite important. So that's where the public comes in, public funding comes in. But I realized that there's a continuous value of death for all these brilliant technologies because, this research is there. TTO does its job, the IP is protected. But then as soon as everything is done, then the question is we're waiting for Tato to come, and Tato must surely fund this. But sometimes with deep tech, we don't realize that the certain it's sequential, and the cost of that sequence falls on whoever assumes the responsibility. So TIA has a mandate, and the TTO have a mandate to publish. TIA has a mandate to fund, and de-risk at an early stage. But it's almost sequential, and that risk falls only on those who assumes But we all know the benefit of that. I'm sure if you told me that, it's like, oh, that'd be great. That pill, that'd be great. But is it really what I want to invest in yet? No. So I feel like there's this sequencing that happens that maybe with pulling industry closer, we're not asking them to just have a look, but we're asking to understand what could be a potential parallel validation besides the technical TRL step-by-step build-up. What could be a parallel validation that if we work together, we could end up having an off-taker at the end of the day to beat the value of and not have pointless research not pointless, but I don't want to say useless. So not usable. Usable. Sorry, I'm not really great with those. But usable or demand-led research. And I think that is what I've been finding myself involved in, because a lot of people come in and say, oh, it's too early. VC will always say it's too early. But I want to be in a position when I'm glad to be engaging, especially also with the Falf and entrepreneurs, building a culture where we understand that the translation shouldn't just happen sequentially, but also with parallel parties involved. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. It was useful. Thanks. So Tom, maybe back to you. What is there a too early stage to get a spin out established? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes starting a company is completely the wrong thing to do. Not only because, let's say, you can't raise money for it, but because you're just not ready. You haven't done the homework, let's say. You haven't done the homework in terms of planning what this business, because that's, a spin-out company, it's a business. And it will have a purpose, hopefully. It will have a purpose statement. It may be not for profit, that's absolutely fine. But if it's a for-profit company, business, have you done the homework, as Tato is saying, and everyone is saying, by which you could sort of imagine this being a possible and viable opportunity. I always like to say, by the way, there are two types of not-for-profits. There's the ones that set out to be not-for-profit, and there's the ones that become not-for-profit. And it's always worth clarifying which one we're talking about. There's a lot of good businesses out there which have ended up not-for-profit. So yeah, I think, just picking up on a lot of the great comments that are being made, I mean, one of the, do you need an IP strategy? Yes, but of course it's not all that you need. That framework I put up, the innovation readiness levels, that gives you 6 channels, right, that you can think about: technology, IP, customers, business model, etc. Now you can, conceptually, you can add as many as you like. I mean, they've already added one called sustainability, which is great. So you've got to measure for that. Some may be more or less important to you. But if you haven't thought about the whole thing, the whole circle, we start at the center. We want to think about all of these dimensions, all of